I was standing in an empty clearing where my cabin used to be, staring at nothing but churned earth and splintered wood, when I realized that sometimes the worst mistakes people make are the ones they're absolutely certain they have the right to make. My name is David Patterson, and 3 days ago I owned a beautiful 2-bedroom log cabin in the mountains outside Asheville, North Carolina. The cabin had been in my family for 40 years, built by my grandfather with his own hands back in 1985. It sat on 2 acres of pristine woodland, with a creek running through the back property and a view of the Blue Ridge Mountains that could make you believe in something bigger than yourself. I'd spent every summer there as a kid, and when my grandfather passed 5 years ago, he left it to me in his will. The property had always been outside any HOA jurisdiction. It was grandfathered in, built decades before the Ridgeview Estates development sprawled up around it in the early 2000s. My cabin sat like an island of old-world charm surrounded by a sea of cookie-cutter McMansions with their beige siding and identical landscaping. I'd renovated it over the past few years, adding solar panels, upgrading the plumbing, and reinforcing the foundation. I worked remotely as a software engineer, and that cabin was my sanctuary. Then Patricia Hendricks moved into the neighborhood. Patricia was 52 years old, blonde hair always styled in that severe bob that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," and she wore pastel cardigans like they were armor. She'd bought the biggest house in Ridgeview Estates 6 months ago and immediately ran for HOA president. She won unopposed because, frankly, most people couldn't be bothered. They just wanted to live their lives, not Patricia. Patricia wanted to reshape the entire neighborhood according to her vision of suburban perfection. The first time I met her was on a Tuesday morning in early March. I was outside splitting firewood when a white Lexus SUV pulled up my gravel driveway. Patricia emerged wearing white capri pants and sandals completely inappropriate for mountain terrain. "Excuse me," she called out, picking her way carefully across my driveway like she was navigating a minefield. "Are you the property owner?" I set down my axe and wiped the sweat from my forehead. "That's me, David Patterson. Can I help you?" She looked at my cabin with barely concealed disgust. "I'm Patricia Hendricks, president of the Ridgeview Estates HOA. I'm here to discuss some concerns we have about your property." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "My property isn't part of the HOA. It was built decades before your development existed." Patricia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, according to our records, when the development was established in 2003, all properties within the defined boundaries were automatically included in the HOA. That includes your lot." "That's not how it works," I said, keeping my voice level. "My grandfather specifically fought to keep this property independent. We have documentation." She pulled a folder from her designer purse. "I have documentation too. And regardless of the HOA status, your property is in violation of multiple county codes. The structure appears to be unpermitted, you have unlicensed solar installations, and your septic system doesn't meet current standards." My jaw clenched. Every single thing she mentioned was completely legal and properly permitted. I'd made sure of it during my renovations. "I have permits for everything. The cabin itself is grandfathered under state law. Maybe you should check your facts before making accusations." Her smile turned icy. "I don't appreciate your tone, Mr. Patterson. I'm simply trying to help you understand that your property is bringing down the values of the entire neighborhood. That rustic aesthetic might seem charming to you, but it looks like a homeless encampment to prospective buyers." "Get off my property," I said quietly. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. This is private property and you're not welcome here. Leave." Patricia's face flushed red. "You're making a very big mistake. The HOA has significant authority and we won't tolerate eyesores in our community. You'll be hearing from us." She stalked back to her Lexus and peeled out, spitting gravel everywhere. I should have taken her threats more seriously. I should have called my brother right then. But I was angry and stubborn, and I figured the law was on my side. Over the next week, I received 3 certified letters from the Ridgeview Estates HOA. Each one was more threatening than the last. They claimed I owed $15,000 in back HOA dues, that my property was in violation of 17 different covenants, and that I had 30 days to either bring everything into compliance or face legal action. I wrote back with copies of my grandfather's original deed, the surveys showing my property predated the HOA, and documentation proving every single violation they claimed was false. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I was at a coffee shop in downtown Asheville when my phone rang. It was my neighbor, Tom Chen, who lived in one of the Ridgeview houses closest to my property line. "David, you need to get home right now," Tom said, his voice tight with urgency. "What's wrong?" "There's a bulldozer on your property. They're tearing down your cabin." For a second, I couldn't process what he'd said. "What?" "The HOA brought in a demolition crew. They have some kind of permit. I tried to stop them, but they said they have legal authorization." "David, they're destroying everything." I was already running to my truck. The drive from downtown Asheville to my property normally took 45 minutes. I made it in 30, breaking every speed limit. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. This couldn't be happening. They couldn't just demolish someone's home. There were laws, procedures, court orders required. When I turned onto my road, I saw the vehicles immediately. 2 bulldozers, an excavator, a dump truck, and Patricia's white Lexus parked on the shoulder like she was overseeing a conquered battlefield. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered, watching in horror. I slammed on my brakes and jumped out of my truck. The cabin was already half destroyed. The front wall had been knocked in, and one of the bulldozers was pushing through what used to be my living room. 40 years of family history, all my possessions, my grandfather's handmade furniture, everything was being ground into rubble. "Stop!" I screamed, running toward the demolition site. "Stop right now!" One of the construction workers saw me coming and waved at the bulldozer operator who killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. Patricia walked over, her heels clicking on the pavement. She was smiling. "Mr. Patterson, I'm glad you could join us." "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I was shaking with rage. "This is my property. You can't just destroy it." She held up a document. "Actually, we can. This is a legal demolition order signed by County Administrator Harold Wexler. Your structure was deemed a public safety hazard and ordered removed immediately." I snatched the paper from her hand. It looked official with the county seal and everything, but something about it felt wrong. The language was vague and there was no court case number, no judge's signature. "This is fake," I said. "You can't get a demolition order without due process. There's supposed to be hearings, appeals, notifications." Patricia shrugged. "Take it up with the county if you have concerns. In the meantime, we're proceeding with the removal of this dangerous structure. For the safety of the community." "You're lying. This is illegal." Her smile widened. "Prove it." "Oh wait, you can't because your property is currently being demolished. Such a shame you didn't keep better records inside. Were all your documents in there, your grandfather's deed? All those permits you claimed to have." My blood ran cold. She'd planned this. She deliberately moved while I was away, knowing all my important papers were in the cabin's fireproof safe. A safe that was currently being crushed under several tons of machinery. Tom Chen pushed through the crowd. "David, I filmed everything. Got it all on my phone from the moment they arrived." Patricia's smile faltered slightly. "I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. "Go ahead," Patricia said. "We have all the proper authorization." "You're the one who's going to be in trouble for interfering with a legal demolition." The next hour was a blur of chaos. The local sheriff's deputies arrived, looked at Patricia's fake county order, and seemed inclined to believe her. The demolition crew stood around smoking cigarettes while I argued with a deputy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Sir, I understand you're upset," Deputy Morrison said, "but they have what appears to be legitimate county authorization. If you want to dispute this, you need to take it up in civil court." They're destroying my home right now, I said. By the time I get in front of a judge, there won't be anything left. I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. The order appears valid. Tom stepped forward. I'm a lawyer, deputy. And that order is clearly fraudulent. Look at the signature. Harold Wexler would never sign something like this without a court proceeding. This is criminal destruction of property. The deputy looked uncomfortable. Sir, are you representing Mr. Patterson? As of this moment, yes. Then he needs to go through proper legal channels. We can't stop a demolition based on suspicions. Patricia looked triumphant. She turned to the bulldozer operator. Continue with the work. The engines roared back to life. I watched helpless as they tore through the rest of my cabin. The bedroom where my grandmother died peacefully in her sleep. The kitchen where my grandfather taught me to cook trout. The living room where I'd proposed to my ex-wife before things fell apart. All of it, reduced to rubble and dust. It took them 3 more hours to complete the demolition. By the time they finished, the sun was setting, and my entire property was just a wasteland of broken timber and shattered dreams. The bulldozers loaded the debris into dump trucks and hauled it away. They even tore up the foundation, leaving nothing but bare earth. Patricia approached me one last time before she left. I hope you've learned something today, Mr. Patterson. The HOA has authority in this community, and we won't tolerate anyone who thinks they're above our rules. If you'd just been reasonable, this could have been avoided. You just committed multiple felonies, I said quietly. I hope you understand that, she laughed. Good luck proving it, and good luck finding a place to stay tonight. I hear the Quality Inn off Highway 40 has reasonable rates. She drove away, followed by the demolition crew. The neighbors slowly dispersed, some offering sympathetic looks, others just shaking their heads. Only Tom remained. David, I'm so sorry, he said. I called you as soon as I saw them arrive, but they worked fast. It's not your fault. I stared at the empty space where my cabin used to be. Did you really get everything on video? Everything. From the moment the first bulldozer arrived until they finished. I also recorded Patricia admitting she knew where your documents were. Thank you. That might be the only thing that saves me. Tom hesitated. Look, I meant what I said about representing you, but I'm just a corporate lawyer. This is way out of my area of expertise. You need someone who specializes in property law and criminal prosecution. I know exactly who I need, I said. My brother. Tom looked confused. Your brother's a lawyer. Better. He's a federal judge. I hadn't spoken to my brother Marcus in almost 6 months. We'd had a falling out over the holidays about something stupid I couldn't even remember now. But Marcus was more than just my older brother. He was the Honorable Marcus Patterson, United States District Judge for the Western District of North Carolina. He'd been appointed 4 years ago at the age of 45, one of the youngest federal judges in the country. Marcus had always been the golden child. Perfect grades, full ride to Duke University, Harvard Law School, clerked for a Supreme Court justice. Meanwhile, I was the screw-up little brother who dropped out of college twice before finally getting my act together. We loved each other, but our relationship had always been complicated. I drove to a Starbucks with Wi-Fi and used their restroom to wash the dirt and tears off my face. Then I sat in my truck and called Marcus's personal cell phone. He answered on the 3rd ring. David, is everything okay? Just hearing his voice made something break inside me. Marcus, I need help. Someone just demolished Grandpa's cabin. There was a long pause. What do you mean demolished? I mean they brought in bulldozers and tore it to the ground. The HOA president claimed she had a county demolition order, but it's fake. They destroyed everything. 40 years of family history, all my possessions, everything's gone. Where are you right now? Sitting in a parking lot near where the cabin used to be. Are you safe? Physically, yes. Mentally, I'm about to lose it. Don't move. I'm coming to you. Send me your location. Marcus, you're in Charlotte. That's a 2-hour drive. Then I'll be there in 2 hours. David, don't talk to anyone else, don't sign anything, and definitely don't do anything that could be construed as threatening. I know you're angry, but I need you to keep your head. Can you do that? Yeah, I said, I can do that. Good, I'm leaving now, he hung up. I sat in my truck as darkness fell over Asheville trying to process what had happened. My entire life had been in that cabin. Photo albums from my childhood, my grandfather's Korean War medals, my grandmother's wedding ring that I'd planned to give to someone special someday. All of it gone. Tom had given me a thumb drive with all his video footage before he left. I plugged it into my laptop and watched the demolition happen again, this time from his perspective. His house had a clear view of my property and he'd captured everything. The bulldozers arriving, Patricia directing the crew. The moment they smashed through the front wall. And there, clear as day, was Patricia saying to one of the workers, "Make sure you get the fireproof safe in the back bedroom. That's where he keeps all his legal documents." She'd known exactly what she was doing. This wasn't just an HOA overstepping its authority. This was premeditated destruction of property with the intent to eliminate evidence of my legal ownership. This was criminal. Marcus arrived exactly 2 hours and 7 minutes after our phone call. His black BMW pulled into the Starbucks parking lot, and he got out wearing jeans and a Duke sweatshirt. It was the most casual I'd seen him in years. He was tall like me, but where I was scruffy with perpetually messy hair, Marcus looked like he'd stepped out of a catalog even in casual clothes. He pulled me into a hug. "Show me." We drove to the property in my truck. Marcus said nothing as we pulled up to the empty clearing. I handed him a flashlight and we walked around the perimeter. The moon was bright enough to see the devastation clearly. Marcus took pictures with his phone, documenting everything from multiple angles. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said. "Start from the beginning." I told him everything. Patricia's first visit, the threatening letters, my response with all the legal documentation, and then the phone call from Tom. Marcus listened without interrupting, his jaw getting tighter with each detail. When I finished, he said, "Do you have copies of your property documents anywhere else?" "Some of it. My attorney in Asheville has copies of the deed and the survey, but all the permits and renovation records were in the cabin." "That's okay, we can get copies from the county. What about this demolition order?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken of Patricia's fake document. Marcus studied them for a long time. "This is amateur hour," he finally said. "The formatting is wrong, the seal is slightly off, and Harold Wexler's signature looks like someone copied it from the county website and pasted it in. A first-year law student could prove this is fraudulent. So what do we do?" Marcus looked at me and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Cold fury. "We're going to destroy her, David, legally, methodically, and completely. What she did here isn't just a civil matter. This is criminal conspiracy, destruction of property, fraud, and possibly even extortion. By the time we're done, Patricia Hendricks is going to prison. I just want my cabin back. You'll get more than that, but first we need to move fast. She destroyed your property thinking you'd have no recourse. She's probably celebrating right now, thinking she got away with it. That's her first mistake. Her second mistake was not checking who your family is." We went back to my truck, and Marcus made a series of phone calls. First to the FBI field office in Charlotte, then to the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of North Carolina, then to someone he called the best property crimes investigator in the state. He spoke in that calm, authoritative voice that judges use, and people listened. By the time he hung up from the last call, he had a plan. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you're going to file a police report with the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office, not with Deputy Morrison, he's clearly useless. You're going to ask specifically for Detective Sarah Chen, who handles major property crimes. She's good, and she won't be impressed by fake county orders. Then what? Then I'm going to make some calls in my official capacity." What Patricia doesn't know is that the federal courts have jurisdiction over civil rights violations, and what she did could arguably constitute deprivation of property without due process. If local authorities don't take this seriously, we can bring federal charges. Can you do that? I mean, isn't it a conflict of interest since I'm your brother? Marcus smiled grimly. I won't be hearing the case personally, but I can make sure the right people are paying attention. And David, the legal community in this state is smaller than you think. Once word gets out that someone demolished a federal judge's family property, Patricia is going to find that all her friends and connections suddenly disappear. We got a hotel room at a Hampton Inn near downtown Asheville. Marcus insisted on paying. I tried to sleep, but kept seeing the bulldozer smashing through my grandfather's handiwork. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up and went to sit on the small balcony overlooking the parking lot. Marcus came out a few minutes later with 2 cups of coffee from the lobby. Can't sleep either. Keep seeing it happen over and over. He sat down in the plastic chair next to me. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you these past months. That fight we had at Christmas was stupid. I don't even remember what it was about. I said something about you wasting your potential living in a cabin in the woods. You told me not everyone wants to be a corporate success story. He laughed bitterly. I was an ass. You found something that made you happy, and I couldn't see past my own narrow definition of success. You weren't wrong, I was hiding up there. From what? I shrugged. Everything. After Jenny left, I just wanted to be somewhere quiet, somewhere that felt safe. Grandpa's cabin was that place. We're going to make this right, Marcus said. I promise you. The next morning, we went to the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office at 8 a.m. sharp. Marcus had called ahead, and Detective Sarah Chen was waiting for us. She was in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Patterson, she said, shaking my hand. I understand you had a property demolished yesterday without your consent. That's putting it mildly. We spent the next 3 hours in an interview room, going over everything in excruciating detail. Tom had emailed me his video footage, and we played it for Detective Chen on her computer. Her expression got darker with each minute. This is one of the most blatant cases of property destruction I've ever seen, she said when the video ended. And that order is absolutely fraudulent. I know Harold Wexler personally. He would never sign off on something like this. Can you arrest Patricia Hendricks? I asked. Not yet. I need to build a case first. But I'm going to start by talking to the demolition company and finding out who hired them and what documentation they were shown. Then I'll interview Miss Hendricks and some of the HOA board members. If this is what it looks like, we're talking about multiple felonies. Marcus leaned forward. Detective, I want to be clear about something. I'm a federal judge, but I'm not involving myself in this case in that capacity. I'm here as David's brother. However, if local authorities don't take this seriously, there are federal avenues we can pursue. Detective Chen smiled. Your Honor, I appreciate the subtle warning, but it's not necessary. What happened here pisses me off, and I don't care if Patricia Hendricks is HOA president or the governor's sister. She's going down. We left the sheriff's office feeling slightly better. Marcus had to drive back to Charlotte for court hearings, but he promised to stay in close contact. I'm also going to hire you the best property attorney in the state, he said. She owes me a favor and she's going to take your case pro bono. Her name is Rebecca Stanton, and she's made a career out of destroying overreaching HOAs. Marcus, I can't ask you to do all this. You're not asking. I'm offering. Besides, this isn't just about you anymore. Patricia Hendricks needs to learn that she can't just destroy people's lives because she has a little bit of power. Someone needs to teach her that lesson. He left, and I was alone again. I drove back to my property and just sat there, staring at the empty space. Some of my neighbors came by to offer condolences. Tom brought me lunch. An older woman named Margaret who lived 3 houses down brought me a casserole and told me she'd always hated the HOA. Patricia's been making everyone miserable, Margaret said. She fined my husband $500 because our mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Can you believe that? The wrong shade. I hope they throw her in jail. By evening, news of what happened had spread through the neighborhood. I started getting calls and emails from other Ridgeview residents who'd had run-ins with Patricia. A man named James told me she'd forced him to tear out his vegetable garden because it violated the aesthetic standards. A young couple said Patricia had threatened to foreclose on their house over unpaid fines they didn't even know existed. The HOA had been terrorizing the neighborhood, and Patricia had been using her position to bully anyone who didn't conform to her vision of suburban perfection. My cabin's destruction was just the most extreme example. Rebecca Stanton called me the next morning. She had a voice like bourbon and steel. "Mr. Patterson, Judge Patterson told me about your situation. I've already started pulling records, and holy hell, this is bad. That demolition order is so obviously fake that I'm amazed anyone fell for it." The deputies seemed to believe it. Deputies aren't document experts, but I am, and I can tell you that Patricia is going to regret this for the rest of her life. I'm filing a civil lawsuit this afternoon for wrongful destruction of property, emotional distress, and punitive damages. We're going to ask for $5 million. $5 million. Isn't that excessive? Not even close. Your cabin was worth at least $300,000 in current market value, probably more given the location and the fact that it was on unrestricted land. But beyond that, we need to send a message. HOAs across the country are getting out of control, and someone needs to draw a line. Your case is going to be that line. She filed the lawsuit that afternoon. Within hours, Patricia was served with papers at her home. I wasn't there, but Tom told me later that Patricia had screamed at the process server and slammed the door in his face. The next day, Detective Chen called. "Mr. Patterson, I've completed my initial investigation. The demolition company was hired by Patricia Hendricks personally, using HOA funds. She showed them the fake demolition order and told them the work was approved by the county. The company owner is cooperating fully with our investigation. He had no idea the order was fraudulent. What about Harold Wexler? I showed him the document yesterday. He confirmed it's a forgery. His signature was copied from county letterhead, and the seal was stolen from the county website. We're treating this as a case of criminal fraud in addition to the property destruction. So what happens now? Now I arrest Patricia Hendricks. They arrested her the following morning at her home. I wasn't there for that either, but the neighborhood gossip network provided all the details. Patricia had answered the door in her bathrobe, expecting it to be a package delivery. Instead, it was Detective Chen and 2 uniformed deputies with an arrest warrant. According to Margaret, who lived close enough to hear everything, Patricia had screamed, "Do you know who I am?" As they put handcuffs on her, Detective Chen had apparently replied, "Yes, ma'am. You're under arrest for criminal fraud, destruction of property, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent." The mugshot made the local news that evening. Patricia Hendricks, still in her bathrobe with her hair uncombed, looking shocked and furious. The reporter mentioned that she was the president of the Ridgeview Estates HOA and that the charges related to the unauthorized demolition of a neighboring property. My phone started ringing off the hook. News stations wanted interviews. Neighbors wanted to know if I was suing. My brother called to congratulate me on the arrest, but I just felt empty. Patricia was arrested, the legal process was moving forward, but my cabin was still gone. All those memories, all that history, destroyed. No amount of money or justice was going to bring it back. Rebecca Stanton met with me a week after Patricia's arrest. We sat in her downtown Asheville office, which had a view of the mountains that reminded me painfully of what I'd lost. "Patricia's been released on bail," Rebecca said. $50,000. Her lawyer is arguing that she had good faith belief that the demolition was authorized. It's a weak defense, but they're trying. What about the civil case? That's moving forward on a separate track. I've deposed the demolition company owner, several of your neighbors, and I'm waiting to depose Patricia herself. Her attorney is trying to delay, but the judge isn't having it. We should have a trial date within 6 months. 6 months. That's actually fast for a civil case. Your brother pulled some strings. The judge assigned to your case is taking it very seriously. Over the next few weeks, more details emerged. Detective Chen's investigation revealed that Patricia had been systematically abusing her HOA position for over a year. She'd been collecting fines for violations that didn't exist, pocketing HOA funds, and using her position to harass anyone she didn't like. The demolition of my cabin was just the most extreme example of her behavior. The Buncombe County District Attorney charged her with 12 counts of fraud, 1 count of conspiracy, 2 counts of destruction of property, and 1 count of theft for misusing HOA funds. If convicted on all counts, she was looking at up to 20 years in prison. The HOA itself held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Patricia as president. They also voted to dissolve several of the more restrictive covenants she'd pushed through. Tom was elected the new president, and his first act was to issue a formal apology to me on behalf of the organization. "We had no idea what Patricia was doing," Tom told me. "She controlled all the information and most of us just trusted her. We should have been paying more attention. It's not your fault. Still, the HOA as an organization bears some responsibility. We're going to make this right." But nothing was right. I was living in a hotel room, all my possessions were gone, and the empty lot where my cabin used to be haunted my dreams. I drove by it every day, unable to stay away, torturing myself with the absence. Marcus came to visit again in early April. He found me sitting on the tailgate of my truck, staring at the empty property. "You look like hell," he said, sitting down next to me. "I feel like hell." Rebecca told me the civil trial is set for August. Patricia's criminal trial is scheduled for October. Both trials are going to be covered extensively in the media. This is a big case, David. Lots of people are watching. I don't care about any of that. I just want my cabin back. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You can't get the cabin back, not the one Grandpa built. But you could build a new one." "With what money?" "Everything I had was in there." The civil lawsuit is going to award significant damages. Even before that, I talked to the HOA, and they're willing to pay you $500,000 to settle their portion of liability. That's separate from what Patricia owes you personally. I looked at him. $500,000? They're terrified of the publicity and potential lawsuits from other homeowners. They want this to go away quietly. Take the money, David. Use it to rebuild something even better than what you lost. "It won't be the same." "No," Marcus agreed. "It won't be, but it'll be yours, and maybe that's enough." I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, "I want to hire the same demolition company that tore down my cabin. I want them to be the ones to rebuild it." Marcus smiled. "That's petty and vindictive. I love it." The HOA settlement was finalized in early May. $500,000 deposited into my account, along with a formal written apology and an agreement that my property would forever remain outside HOA jurisdiction. They even paid to have the lot cleared and graded properly, removing all the debris that the demolition had left behind. I hired the demolition company's owner, a man named Frank Rodriguez, to help me rebuild. He felt terrible about his role in destroying the original cabin and was eager to make amends. "I should have questioned that demolition order more carefully," Frank said. "I trusted that HOA woman because she seemed so official. Never again. From now on, I verify everything personally." We designed a new cabin together, bigger than the original, with 3 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, and a wraparound porch. I used some of the original foundation stones that Frank's crew had carefully recovered from the debris. It wouldn't be my grandfather's cabin, but it would honor his memory. Construction began in June. I visited the site every day, watching the new structure rise from the ruins of the old. It was therapeutic in a way, seeing something positive emerge from destruction. The civil trial began in mid-August. Patricia showed up in a conservative navy suit, her hair pulled back, trying to look respectable. It didn't work. The jury took one look at Tom's video footage and made up their minds. Rebecca Stanton destroyed Patricia on the witness stand. She got her to admit that she'd known the demolition order was fake, that she'd deliberately targeted my cabin to eliminate my property documents, and that she'd used HOA funds to pay for the demolition without board approval. You knew that Mr. Patterson's cabin was his family home, correct? Rebecca asked. I knew it was an eyesore, Patricia replied. That wasn't my question. You knew it had been in his family for 40 years. Yes. You knew his grandfather built it with his own hands, I suppose. You knew that all of his personal possessions were inside when you ordered it demolished. I assumed he'd had time to remove them. You assumed. Miss Hendricks, you ordered the demolition while Mr. Patterson was away from the property specifically so he wouldn't have time to save anything. Isn't that true? Patricia's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The jury had seen who she really was. The trial lasted 5 days. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They found Patricia liable for wrongful destruction of property, intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, and a dozen other charges. They awarded me $2.8 million in compensatory damages and another $2 million in punitive damages. $4.8 million total. Rebecca hugged me when the verdict was read. We did it. We actually did it. I felt numb. It was a victory, but it felt hollow. Money couldn't bring back my grandfather's handmade furniture or my grandmother's photo albums. It couldn't restore 40 years of memories, but it was something. Patricia's criminal trial began in October. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, journalists, and legal observers. Patricia had hired an expensive Charlotte attorney who argued that she'd been trying to enforce legitimate HOA rules and had made an honest mistake about the demolition order. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Foster, eviscerated that defense. She presented evidence of Patricia's systematic fraud, her misuse of HOA funds, and her deliberate targeting of my property. She called Tom Chen to testify about the video footage. She called Harold Wexler to testify about the forged signature. She called me to testify about the loss of my family home. I sat on the witness stand and told the jury about my grandfather building the cabin in 1985. About summers spent there as a child. About renovating it after I inherited it. About coming home to find it destroyed. Did you ever give Patricia Hendricks or the Ridgeview Estates HOA permission to demolish your cabin? Amanda asked. No, never. Did you receive any prior notice that demolition was planned? No. How did you learn your cabin was being destroyed? My neighbor called me while I was having coffee in town. By the time I got there, it was half gone. I saw some of the jurors wipe their eyes. Patricia sat stone-faced at the defense table. The criminal trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury convicted Patricia on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was harsh. Miss Hendricks, you abused a position of trust to bully your neighbors and destroy a man's family home, Judge Raymond Williams said. Your actions were calculated, malicious, and devastating. You showed no remorse then, and you've shown no remorse throughout this trial. This court sentences you to 8 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. You are also ordered to pay full restitution to Mr. Patterson for any damages not covered by the civil judgment. This includes the value of all personal property destroyed. Patricia finally broke down and cried. Her attorney put his arm around her shoulders. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just exhaustion. My new cabin was finished in November, almost 9 months after the original was destroyed. Frank and his crew did beautiful work. It was bigger and more modern than the original, with energy-efficient windows and updated systems. But it also incorporated elements that honored my grandfather's design. The stone fireplace used rocks from the original foundation. The front door was made from lumber salvaged from the debris. The mantel was carved from one of the original support beams. Marcus came for the unofficial housewarming. Just the two of us, sitting on the new porch with beers, watching the sunset over the Blue Ridge Mountains. You did it, Marcus said. You survived something that would have broken most people, and you came out the other side. I had help. If you hadn't been there, Patricia would have gotten away with it. Maybe, but you're the one who had to live through it. You're the one who lost everything and found a way to rebuild. He raised his beer. To Grandpa's cabin, old and new. We clinked bottles and drank. Over the following months, life slowly returned to normal. I settled back into my routine of remote work and mountain solitude. The neighborhood was quieter now without Patricia's reign of terror. The new HOA board under Tom's leadership focused on actual community building rather than enforcement of arbitrary rules. I used some of the settlement money to create a legal defense fund for homeowners facing HOA abuse. Rebecca Stanton helped me set it up, and within a year, we'd helped 17 families fight back against overreaching HOAs across North Carolina. It felt good to turn my nightmare into something that could help others. Patricia served her time at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women in Raleigh. I didn't follow her imprisonment closely, but Rebecca told me that Patricia's husband divorced her and sold their Ridgeview house. Her children stopped visiting after the first year. She'd lost everything, just like I had, except she'd done it to herself. I thought I'd feel more satisfaction about that, but I didn't. I just felt sad. Sad that someone had been so consumed by the need for control that she'd destroyed multiple lives, including her own. 2 years after the demolition, I met someone. Her name was Rachel, and she was a photographer who'd moved to Asheville to shoot the mountains. We met at a coffee shop when she asked if she could photograph my cabin for a project about modern mountain architecture. I said yes, and we spent the afternoon talking about art and loss and rebuilding. She was the first person I'd let into my life since everything happened. We took it slow, but there was something there, something that felt like possibility. One evening, we were sitting on the porch and she asked me about the original cabin. I told her everything. The demolition, the trials, the rebuilding. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "You must hate HOAs." I thought about it. I hate what Patricia did. But the HOA itself was just a tool she used. The current board is actually doing good work in the community. They're proving that HOAs can function without terrorizing residents. That's very mature of you, or maybe I'm just tired of being angry. Rachel kissed me. I think you're amazing. 3 years after the demolition, I got a letter from Patricia. It was forwarded through Rebecca Stanton, who called to warn me it was coming. "You don't have to read it," Rebecca said. "I can send it back unopened if you want." "No, I'll read it." The letter was surprisingly short. Patricia's handwriting was shaky, like she'd written it multiple times before settling on this version. "Mr. Patterson," it began. "I know no apology can undo what I did to you. I destroyed your family home, your possessions, and your sense of security. I did it because I was arrogant and cruel, and because I believed my position gave me the right to control others. I was wrong about everything. I've spent 3 years in prison thinking about the harm I caused, not just to you, but to everyone in Ridgeview Estates who I bullied and intimidated. I destroyed my own life in the process of trying to destroy yours. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I understand what I took from you and I'm truly sorry. I hope you found peace. Patricia Hendricks." I read the letter twice, then set it aside. Rachel asked me what I was going to do with it. "Nothing," I said. "She's right that it doesn't undo anything, but maybe it's a start for her. Maybe that's enough." That evening, Marcus called. He'd just been appointed to the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals, one step below the Supreme Court. At 49, he was one of the youngest appellate judges in the country. "I wanted you to be the first to know," he said. "Congratulations. Grandpa would be so proud. He'd be proud of both of us. You rebuilt after losing everything. That takes a different kind of strength than climbing the legal ladder. We're both still standing. That's what matters." After we hung up, I walked out onto the porch. The November air was crisp, and the mountains were dark silhouettes against a sky full of stars. Rachel came out and wrapped her arms around me from behind. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I really am. The cabin wasn't the one my grandfather built. My possessions weren't the ones I'd spent 40 years accumulating. My life wasn't the one I'd imagined living, but it was good. It was real. It was mine. Patricia Hendricks had tried to destroy me because she believed she had the right to control everything in her domain. She'd believed her position gave her power over other people's lives. She'd been wrong on both counts. The law had limits on what HOAs could do, and even when those limits were violated, there were consequences. Justice had been served. Not quickly, not easily, but completely. Patricia had gone to prison. I'd been compensated for my losses, and reforms had been implemented to prevent other HOA presidents from abusing their power. The system had worked, even if it had taken time. Sometimes I still dreamed about the original cabin. About my grandfather teaching me to fish in the creek. About my grandmother baking cookies in the old wood stove. About all the summers and winters and springs that had shaped who I was. Those memories hadn't been destroyed, I realized. They were still there, still mine, regardless of what happened to the physical structure. The new cabin was different, but it was also better in some ways. More space, more light, more room for a future that included Rachel and whatever came next. The past informed it, but didn't limit it. 5 years after the demolition, the legal saga finally concluded. Patricia had been released from prison after serving 5 years of her 8-year sentence. The restitution payments continued, managed through the court system. I donated most of that money to the Homeowner Defense Fund, keeping only what I needed to maintain the cabin and property. Tom Chen told me that Patricia had moved to Tennessee after her release, wanting to start over somewhere far from Ridgeview Estates. Her divorce was final, her children were adults living their own lives, and she worked at a grocery store stocking shelves. It was a far cry from being HOA president of a wealthy development. "You ever think about her?" Tom asked me one day when we were having coffee in town. "Sometimes," I admitted. "I wonder if she really changed or if she just learned to hide it better." "Does it matter?" I thought about that. "I guess not. She's not my problem anymore. She's just someone who made terrible choices and paid the price." The Ridgeview Estates HOA continued to function under Tom's leadership, and eventually under new leadership when Tom stepped down. They focused on actual community needs like road maintenance and neighborhood events, rather than enforcing arbitrary aesthetic rules. Several restrictive covenants were removed entirely. The neighborhood became a genuinely pleasant place to live. I never rejoined the HOA and they never pushed. My property remained independent as it had been from the beginning. But I participated in neighborhood events, helped organize the annual block party, and considered many of my neighbors' friends. The community had healed from Patricia's reign of terror. Rachel and I got married in a small ceremony on the cabin's porch, with the mountains as our backdrop. Marcus officiated, using his authority as a federal judge to make it legal and binding. Tom and his wife came, along with Rebecca Stanton and Detective Sarah Chen. Even Frank Rodriguez attended, bringing his wife and kids. It was a celebration not just of our relationship, but of survival and rebuilding, of taking something broken and making it whole again. Of understanding that while we couldn't control what others did to us, we could control how we responded. Marcus gave a short speech at the reception. 5 years ago, my brother lost everything to someone who believed power gave her the right to destroy. Today, he's gained everything that actually matters. Love, community, and peace. That's not just poetic justice. That's the best kind of victory. Everyone raised their glasses and drank to that. As I stood on my porch that evening, watching the sun set over the same mountains my grandfather had loved, I realized that Patricia Hendricks had failed in every way that mattered. She tried to break me, and instead, I'd become stronger. She tried to eliminate my family legacy, and instead, I'd rebuilt it better than before. She tried to prove her power, and instead, she'd proven the limits of that power. The law had worked the way it was supposed to work. Slowly, frustratingly, but ultimately effectively. She'd committed crimes, been caught, prosecuted, and punished. I'd been wronged, fought back, and been compensated. The system wasn't perfect, but it had been enough, and I'd learned something important through the whole ordeal. HOAs weren't inherently evil. They were just organizations, and like any organization, they reflected the people who ran them. Under Patricia's leadership, the Ridgeview HOA had been a nightmare. Under Tom's leadership, it had become a force for good in the community. The institution itself was neutral. The people made the difference. I also learned that having a federal judge for a brother didn't hurt. Marcus's involvement hadn't given me special treatment, but it had ensured that the right people paid attention. Patricia hadn't gotten away with her crimes partly because people knew that a federal judge was watching. That kind of oversight mattered, but more than anything, I'd learned that I was more resilient than I thought. Losing the cabin had felt like losing a part of myself, and maybe it was. But that loss had also created space for something new. For Rachel, for the Homeowner Defense Fund, for a deeper relationship with Marcus, for a stronger connection to my community. I wouldn't wish what happened on anyone. The pain, the loss, the violation of having your home destroyed was something I'd never fully get over. But I'd survived it. I'd fought back. I'd won. And now, standing on the porch of my new cabin with my wife beside me and my brother laughing with friends inside, I realized something Patricia had never understood. She'd said the demolition was legal. She'd been wrong about that, but even if she'd been right, it wouldn't have mattered. Because some things can't be demolished, no matter what machinery you bring or what fake orders you show. Family, resilience, community, justice, those things survive everything. Patricia Hendricks had brought bulldozers to destroy a cabin, but she couldn't demolish what really mattered. And in the end, that had made all the difference. The story didn't have a Hollywood ending where everything was restored exactly as it had been. Real life doesn't work that way, but it had something better. A new beginning built on the foundation of the old. A future informed by the past, but not imprisoned by it. A victory that was hard-won and therefore meaningful. As the stars came out over the Blue Ridge Mountains, and my friends and family celebrated inside the cabin I'd built from the ashes of destruction, I raised my glass one more time. To my grandfather who'd started this journey. To Marcus who'd helped me finish it. To Rachel who'd shown me what came next. And even in a strange way to Patricia Hendricks who'd taught me that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best things in your life. The cabin was new, but the mountains were eternal. My possessions were replacements, but my memories were original. My life had been interrupted but not ended. And justice, slow and imperfect as it was, had been served. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.